We've decided that we're going to cease the actual bombing mission that Canada has so far been involved in and shift to a different military mission. We have consistently said that Canada has a strong role to play, obviously on the humanitarian and refugee side as well as part of the coalition against the Islamic State. But we also know that Canada has a tremendous level of expertise, hard won in Afghanistan over the past 10 years, to help with training, to help local troops be more effective in the fight on the ground. And I think we're going to be stepping up our involvement in that angle of the military mission.
So just to be clear, you're not against bombing. It was more a decision about Canada and whether it was able to add value on the bombing front as opposed to other things.
Indeed, there's a wide range of things that Canada can do, and certainly our Royal Canadian Air Force is outstanding in doing what it does. But I know that we have different ways that we can be possibly even more helpful to our friends and allies. And I've had this conversation with a number of times with my fellow leaders, and they are reassured that Canada is continue to be a strong and active partner in the fight against the Islamic State.
And Paris has made no difference to your view of what Canada's role in that should be?
I think Paris has highlighted for us in a very personal way. Myself being a French Canadian, I obviously feel a tremendous closeness to our French cousins, and continue to stand resolute that Canada has an important role to play.
Let's talk a little more generally about politics in the West. It feels like a very strange time. There's political skepticism in many, many countries. Political disenchantment, sort of antipathy towards the elites and the establishments in lots of countries. I wonder what you think your election in Canada said about that disenchantment, and potentially about ways politicians can react to it and deal with it.
You have, over the past little while, seen the rise of the anti-politician, whether it was our own Rob Ford in Toronto, who was very much an anti-politician, or Donald Trump, who makes a big thing about not being a politician. I think that has, to a certain extent, run its course, just because people don't want the usual kinds of politicians, fine, but they're also looking for people who are actually going to be serious about bringing people together and serving and being upfront about the tough decisions we have to make.
That's a very optimistic point of view, isn't it? Because actually, if anything, Donald Trump, contrary to what everybody expected, his support seems to be growing rather than receding.
You know what, we've seen this a few times just in our own election, where polls were showing that more divisive positions were very, very popular. But when you get right down to it, when citizens take a long, hard look in the ballot box about actually voting against your neighbor, against someone who's different than you, in pluralistic societies like we have, it becomes very difficult to sustain the hatred or the fear of the shopkeeper you see down the street every day, or your colleague from 2 cubicles over. And that dynamic is what is really a source of optimism for me.
I mean, lots has actually been written about your appearance, good looks, tattoo, all of these things. Do you think they contributed to your electoral success? You look like a fresher faced kind of politician to some of the others, the greyer folks, the greyer older folks?
It didn't really play all that much during the election campaign.
It's because we didn't know
used to me. Well, there's in the beginning, there's a little more interest in appearance. The fact that I'm friendly and like people, shouldn't count against me when I'm hoping to represent them on the world stage.
In Australia, there's been a real debate about whether the Queen should be head of state. Doesn't feel as though there's been that debate in Canada to quite the same degree, but you took the portrait down, the Queen's portrait down in one government building. Why did you do that?
There had been a long tradition of showcasing Canadian artists in our embassies around the world, as you've certainly seen in our embassy here at Canada House. So it was something that the previous government did as a I think as a sign of its disrespect towards the arts community, for which they had been famously accused, and I think rightly accused in many levels. So it was more about restoring Canada's place, and not meant at all as a disrespect to our Queen, who still adorns many banknotes and others. And You're right that there isn't a huge appetite for that in Canada. There are far more pressing things, and we're perfectly happy with our Queen of Canada.
When you look at Canada today, it's interesting because you're not the United States. Clearly different to the United States in a whole lot of respects, right? Well, do you feel Canada's closer to the UK or to the United States?
You know, I think that the time of Canadians worried that there is no Canadian identity has passed. I mean, we have succeeded in creating an extraordinary country based on shared values and approach and an optimism about the world that, quite frankly, leaves us a little less needy in terms of external recognition or external definitions.
That's interesting. I mean, obviously, you're not going to join the United States and become the next sort of half dozen states of the US.
No, but if they ever wanted to join us as provinces, we could probably talk about that.
You're standing for a new politics. It's a new generation. And yet, of course, your name is an old name in Canadian politics. And of course, most people here will know, of course, your father was Prime Minister. Let me be brutal. Does it embarrass you that you're part of Canada's first family dynasty?
No, because I'm incredibly proud of my father, the values he stood for, the place he gave Canada on the world stage, and I respect Canadians' intelligence. I know that if I'm sitting here as Prime Minister, it has very little to do with my last name.
Do you believe that? Do you think you would be there if you hadn't been the son of Pierre Trudeau?
I don't deny that doors opened up for me. The way I was raised was that I have to work 2 or 3 times as hard as anyone else would to walk through that door now that it was open. And I think Canadians get that. There's an awful lot of people who sort of shrugged and said, oh, he has nothing but a name to go on, and found themselves slightly bewildered as I left them in the dust.
Justin Trudeau, very nice to talk to you.
Real pleasure. Thank you.